Welcome, everyone. I am Megan, and I am here for the March edition of New Moon Activation. And please say hello to Bronwyn.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be back. Hi, Megan.
It's wonderful to be here. We attempted this earlier this week. I was sitting in a Starbucks in Santa Fe, and it was a brief attempt that switched to the car that became even more brief. So I am so appreciative of you for being willing to keep rescheduling this. And
I love that we're both that dedicated to being here, and that you're dedicated to this new moon activation to the degree that you'll show up from
a
parking lot in Santa Fe. It was awesome to see you on your adventure.
Thank you. It was great to carry you with me and the rest of the way home. And now here we are sitting on Friday, and the new moon is tomorrow. I think afternoon here in our time.
I think it's actually.
Oh no, it is in the
wee
morning.
Hours of the morning. Yeah.
I always say that. I heard you on your other podcast talk about how we should wait until the afternoon, maybe, to start doing our ritual.
Yeah, even Sunday this weekend, I think, is a juicy day for new moon ritual. Really, you can choose to do your new moon ritual anytime in the 3 days after the new moon, but just make sure you know what time the new moon is. So you're doing it not right before the new moon, but afterwards. So you really get that ripening energy and not the ending energy.
Great, yeah. Good. We're also sitting here now on the cusp of the spring equinox. And I was sharing with you before we got on this that we're getting ready to reemerge as a community. Perennial will be reopening on at the end of the month.
And so excited for you.
I know, me too. Thank you. And so many plans are underway. And this time in hibernation has proven to really deepen and be a time of recommitment about what it is that this community is supposed to be, and how we can use this past 12 months to really be fertilizer for coming into a deeper and richer expression of ourselves going forward. And the way that that's going to show up in terms of what happens here in these spaces that we call perennial is we are going to really kind of showcase or hold up this idea that life happens in cycles. You know, our own individual lives, the life of the planet, and just even the course of a day travels from dusk to dawn and back to dawn again. So as we get ready to reemerge, I really want to bring this message forward because it is such a deep well of inspiration and wisdom in terms of how we should be conducting our life and our lifestyle. So you mentioned that from an astrological perspective, spring is a beginning of how we can see a cycle. And I'm just going to leave it there and let you take it in the way that you do so beautifully into how we can see nothing is happening as usual by mistake or just in a random way, but instead there's beautiful synchronicity for all of us as we re-emerge during this time of spring into what is going to come next for us.
Yeah, it's such a poignant time. That connection with cyclical time is at the heart of the work that I do, and it's the heart of all astrological work, but using cyclical time, especially the movements of the sun and moon, to reconnect with ourselves and with the natural world is one of the primary ideas that drives my own work, because I think it's so healing and joy-bringing, really, because we live in a culture that's driven by the idea of linear time and achievement and kind of this ever, this arrow that's always pointing up. We're always going somewhere along this straight line. And natural time actually isn't like that. As you were saying, we're always engaged in these cycles, whether it's of dusk and dawn or winter and summer, the waning and waxing of the moon, we're returning and returning and returning to the same place with slightly different energies and growing a little bit along that spiral path. And the movements of the moon, and that's why we meet up every new moon, right? Because it's the beginning of a new 29-day cycle. And last time we met, we talked about likening the lunar cycle to the in-breath and the out-breath. It seems like a really simple idea, but I can't tell you how much positive feedback I've gotten about just that metaphor. So many people have come by this month to say, oh, that thing that you and Megan were talking about and likening it to the breath, I really got it.
Good.
So that's the primary place that we can go in our bodies to understand the nature of cyclical time, right? We breathe in and increase, and we breathe out and release. The moon does that every month. The sun does that every year. And the astrological signs are built around the movement of the sun. And there's 12 of them, of course, we know. And they're like a symbolic journey. We can use them as a metaphor for our human journey of wisdom seeking, the journey of the soul. And it's not just a journey that we complete in a lifetime. We complete it over many lifetimes, but also in the course of one day. And there's an order to it, but we do move in a spiral way, in different way through that order. But all of that said, it's a calendar, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And
sorry,
what
go
I
ahead.
think is so interesting about what you just said is most of us, when we start to dabble in astrology, we think, well, I got to find out what my sign is. And then we kind of see ourselves from that fixed sign. And if you're a Virgo, you're always a Virgo. You think, well, I don't have to care about Aries, or I don't have to care about Capricorn because I'm not that. But it's the relationship of what you are to that, right? And you're moving through those.
It's all about
energy.
Time and relationships. Exactly. So I think when we're first introduced to astrology, we think it's a personality type system, right? We think it's like the Myers-Briggs assessment, but fancier and new age.
Yeah.
And in a sense it is. We can totally use it that way. That's not wrong. But why? Why does astrology tell us about who we are? It's because astrology tells us about the quality of a particular moment in time. Astrology is about the energy of time and the cyclical movement of energies through time. So the reason that your astrological chart can tell you things about who you are is because it's keyed to the moment that you were born. So that's the why. Astrology is like a spiritual calendar, and it's very complex, right? We're born in a certain moment. We take our first breath. That's what the ancient astrologers would say, is that your chart is the reflection of the moment when you took your first breath.
Okay.
Not just where the sun was, that's what we call our sign, but where all of the planets were in the sky, what the season was, what the time of day was, where you are on the planet. All of these inform what we can learn from the chart. But ultimately, it's about the movement of time, and that's why it can work to tell us about us. That's why it can also work as a predictive system, and why it can work to tell us about just what's going on in the world, what's going on politically and historically, because it's about time. And it's about that flow, that cyclical returning flow of time. And as astrologers, we look at the movement through time of all of the planets. But as we're just beginning our journey of astrology, we don't have to know anything about the planets. We can just connect with the movements that are already so humanly familiar to us of the sun and the moon. And because the astrology that I practice is Western astrology, which came about in the Northern Hemisphere, this is a symbolic system that's keyed to the Northern Hemisphere. It does work in the Southern Hemisphere, but you will hear me talking about the seasons from a Northern Hemisphere perspective. I just wanted to say that as an aside, in case there's anybody listening from other parts of the world. Astrology works in the Southern Hemisphere, but Western astrology is all keyed to what we experience seasonally here in the North. So we start with Aries and end with Pisces. There's 12 signs. They take us through the wheel of the year. So the signs are keyed to those moments in the seasons. as we experience them in the Northern Hemisphere. So where we're sitting right now in this last week before the vernal equinox, before we enter Aries. So this is actually what defines the equinox, right? It's the moment that the sun reaches 0 degrees Aries. The sun moves out of Pisces and into Aries. That's why, like, one year it'll be on the 21st and the next year it'll be like this year on the 20th.
Mhm.
If you've ever wondered about that, it's the movement of the sun through the zodiac. So it's keyed to that 0 degree Aries point. That's how we know the exact time of the equinox. Okay, so
So
that's not
here,
yeah.
even like our, the way our businesses run, the way our schools run, you could all say is connected to astrology.
Our calendar is an astrological
Exactly.
calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah. The seasons, the even the names of the days of the week,
Yes.
the existence of the days of the week.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
not a lot of people know this, but the months, the days, the shape of the year, the movement of the sun and moon, everything that we do in our normal calendar system, it's all astrological.
Yeah. I'm determined to take the woo-woo out of astrology. So that's
Absolutely.
why I keep trying to
It's a
point those things
practical
out.
system. And, you know, in many other cultures around the world today, it's a perfectly normal profession to be an astrologer. Everyone has an astrologer. You wouldn't think of starting a business or getting married or anything else without consulting your astrologer. It's not at all weird. It's totally mainstream. And
Yeah.
we're working towards a day when, and I think we're actually getting closer to it. Astrology is getting a lot more mainstream. And because it is, it's so important to have conversations like this where we dispel some of the myths. And I think when we first come into it, it's exciting. Like the mystery of it is exciting. And we want to know all about, oh, what are my asteroids and what is Jupiter doing? And of course, I share all of that stuff as well. But to go back to the beginning of the conversation, one of the primary gifts of astrology is connecting us with the natural world and with cyclical time. So there's no better place to start than with the moon and the sun, because we're already familiar with that movement. We're just now giving new meaning and new names to this relationship we already have with this cycling of time. So that idea of rebirth and renewal in the spring is so innate to our experience of the world and to our culture and to the celebrations, cultural celebrations that you see across cultures. And in astrology, that, as I said, is keyed to the Aries ingress, the beginning of the sun moving through Aries. So we're at this magical point in the year right now. As we're heading into this, we have one more week until Aries ingress, vernal equinox. And what we're doing is living through that, you know, we talk about the balsamic period of the moon, right? Before the new moon, as a time of rest and reflection, the bottom of the breath, and a time to really think about what has happened over the last month and what do we want to release and what little essence do we want to carry with us. So we do that every month right before the new moon. We're having that moment in the year right now as we sit in the last degrees of Pisces, the very last sign of the zodiac, the Omega, right? We're moving not from the Alpha to the Omega now, but from the Omega to the rebirth with the Alpha of Aries. So it's a really tender, vulnerable, magical, beautiful time because one cycle is ending. The solar cycle is ending. The solar year is ending. The zodiacal year is ending. And we're beginning again. And if you look at the qualities of Pisces and Aries, you can really feel that. Pisces is the sign of the mystic and the poet. Pisces is the ocean where we all dissolve. Pisces is all about releasing our boundaries and being able to connect spiritually and emotionally because those boundaries aren't there. And the whole one with everything, right? It's Pisces, it's dissolving in the ocean of being. And if we think of it in terms of the end of that human cycle, Pisces is death and dissolution. It's the place that we go to between lives. It's the bardo. It's everything that we release. It's when we release the body is ultimately when we reach the end of that developmental cycle in this life, we'll release and dissolve our bodies and move on to the next spark of birth. And that spark of rebirth, that conception point, at 0 Aries. So I liken this time to, if you know about Buddhism, you might know about this concept of the bardo, which is this idea of the place that we visit between lives.
Mhm.
And what we encounter there are experiences of and images of all of the attachments that we've built up over a lifetime. And we go through a process of releasing them in order to be reborn. So every time we go through a dark moon before the new moon, or the last degrees of Pisces before Aries in the spring, our soul is going through, our psychology is going through a process like that of releasing. And we see this like even in the tradition of spring cleaning, or the eggs that we decorate with at Easter time. There's symbols of this all around in the culture. So
Well,
no, it isn't woo, it's embedded already in the culture. It's time to cleanse and release and begin anew.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about even in the Christian wisdom tradition, the idea that Easter happens where it's the,
Death and resurrection.
the death and resurrection and the sorrow and the joy that sit right next to each other in that moment.
All of that is embedded in the solar cycles and embedded in the cycle of the year. And it's symbolic and mythical, but it's also real in terms of the astronomy, right?
Mhm.
The equinoxes are the balance points when we have equal day and night, right? Equinox, equal night is what that word means. The day and the night are equal. We have the equal balance of dark and light.
Mhm.
So this is the moment of turning from dark to light.
Mhm.
In the fall, what happens seasonally is we turn from light to dark.
The reverse.
So, and that's literal in terms of sunlight. If you live in the north above the 50th parallel like I do, the reality of that is very
Dramatic,
vividly, yeah. And where you guys are too, there's a big difference between the hours of daylight in winter and
Yeah.
summer. So there's an astronomical reality. We are literally turning from darkness to light. And people have observed that. And it isn't that we've created myths to explain it, at least that's not how I see the world. It's that the beautiful movements of the natural world reflect an inner mythic archetypal reality. So it's the blending of those two realities. And that's where we sit. And that's why this is such a potent and delicate time where we're balanced, as Carmen Spaniola says, between form and formlessness.
Mm.
We're moving
Love
out
that.
of formlessness of Pisces and taking form again with Aries.
Mhm.
It's really a beautiful time. And it's also a time to take seriously, just like with the teachings of the Bardo. We train for this time as Buddhists, right? The time between death and life. And symbolically, we're moving through a time like that in the year. And it's so powerful this year because we see it reflected in the culture, because we are finally seeing the possibility of an end to this pandemic. And because we have been in a kind of winter of the soul for the whole last year. I see memes and jokes about how it's been March for a year. And it does kind of feel like that. Like it's been a long Pisces season. It's been a long, dark winter.
Mhm.
And symbolically, astrologically, we've talked about that too. Capricorn is a sign that's the heart of winter. And we've had our two big teacher planets in Capricorn. They finally moved into Aquarius. So there's lots of other symbolism we can pull in. But the basic idea is one of renewal and rebirth. But I think the energy to consider there is that it's, yes, there's like the celebration that comes with the Aries ingress, but the time before it is so precious because we want to be really prepared. And, you know, you were talking about this before we started recording about moving mindfully into reopening your business or expanding. I know you've been open, you have bravely, you know, managed to be open in one form or another through all of this, but expanding that opening.
Mhm.
And we're all doing that in one form or another in our lives right now. And the mindfulness part is so important. What pieces do we want to bring into the new opening and expansion? What pieces do we want to leave behind? And
Mhm.
just that movement, that cautious movement, because when we're newborn selves and souls, we're vulnerable. And that's Aries time. Like we're moving out of this wise time of being awash in the ocean of being with Pisces to Aries time, which is like, yep, this is me. I'm here. I'm a newborn soul ready to tackle the world, and it's all about me. Not in a bad way for all you Aries out there. What would we do without those boundaries and without that idea of the assertion of self and who am I in the world? And this is my spark and this is my gift and I'm going to fight for it. That's what Aries time is about.
Okay.
It's that driving force. This is, I mean, it always makes me think of that Dylan Thomas poem too, right? The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age. It's a poem about spring and about this tender and sort of violent quality of spring that we see the greeting cards with the bunnies and the flowers, and it kind of disguises this raw power that's beneath this rebirth of life. And that's something to take really seriously. And the way that we use that power within ourselves, because we all have it. So
you used the word cautious before. Is this time, as we are on the cusp of moving into Aries time, is the quality of the reflection we should be doing or the mindfulness that we should be bringing to it, like cautious, like in from the standpoint that if we don't get it right, we're going to make a big mistake?
I'm kind of laughing at myself because as you guys probably know by now, I have a lot of planets in Taurus, and cautious is kind of a Taurus keyword. We're the ones that are like hanging back on the sidelines, like, no, you go ahead. I'll see what happens.
You do it first. Let me see what happens when you do it.
And the Aries is the one that's like, okay, I'll go first. So cautious is not an Aries keyword. So this is totally personally coming from Taurus me going, let's be cautious now as we begin this. But there is a reality to that. I think rather than cautious, which does, as you've pointed out, imply fear, let's take that out of it. That's like Bronwyn speak, and think of the word mindful. We want to be mindful as we move into that new expression. I think that's a more accurate word anyway.
And intentional
intentional. That's so much better. I love that.
Yeah. Okay.
Intentional is a good Aries word. I'm thinking, is mindful really an Aries word? No, not really. Mindful isn't Aries. Cautious isn't Aries, but intentional is.
Okay.
Intentional is. It's like setting your focus on something and then achieving it. But it's that focus setting, that drive. Think of the fire of Aries, right? Aries is a fire sign, the first of the fire signs, cardinal fire, the beginning of fire. So we think about that match strike and the focus that it takes it's a focused fire. So the three fire signs, Aries, then we get to Leo. Leo is like the beautiful coals at the bottom of the fireplace.
Okay.
And then Sagittarius, the last of the fire signs, is like all the little sparklers going off. But Aries is the beginning of fire. So we're starting something. That's what Aries likes to do. And yeah, I did bring in that Taurus word cautious, but we'll get to that in May.
Okay.
That's kind of like the cautious Taurus comes after Aries has lit all the fires. Like, okay, let's look at this and see what we can really build from it. But that's not where we are right now.
Okay.
Right now, we are emerging from the ocean into the warmth of that new flame that's lit by Aries. So mindful and intentional. And taking this time, the last of the Pisces time, which is dream time, to think about what have I dreamt for myself over this last month, but especially over the last year? And which parts of those dreams can I take now and use this spark to make them real?
So as we sit here, and we're recording this now on Friday, but tomorrow already in the morning is the new moon. And so what energy or work or focus do we want to give ourselves to over the course of these next few days?
Yeah. So what I always recommend in the days leading up to the new moon, where we're sitting now, and you can plan this for next new moon, or if you hear this before the morning, is to take some time to reflect on the month that has come before. Think about what you want to let go of. Just reflect on all of your experiences, the challenges and the victories, and use it as an opportunity to release and let go. And if you want to ritualize that a little bit with a bath or some kind of Like if you keep an altar, it's a great time to take everything off and cleanse it and refresh it. Some people like to cleanse their crystals if you're a crystal person. If you always have a candle going, it's a good time to get rid of the old one and start a new one. You get the idea. Whatever is a beautiful ritual of renewal to prepare for the new moon. And then when the new moon comes, you can create a personal ritual of intention setting and also just sitting in a place of openness to what is new and what is being conceived and what is coming into your life. So we do this every new moon for the before the new moon and after. But because we're in this beautiful kind of Bardo space at the end plus the beginning of the astrological year, you can do this practice for the whole year, thinking about approaching this next week, the last degrees of Pisces, as that time of releasing the year. And then after the vernal equinox, doing a personal ceremony of renewal and intention setting for the new astrological year. So you can do it every month before and after the new moon, and for the whole year, just using this beautiful time of the last degrees of Pisces. There's a poignancy to this time of the next week, right? Because we're beginning the new lunar cycle, but we're ending the whole solar cycle. So as always in astrology, it's not just about one cycle, it's the mysterious particular quality of time that happens when the cycles blend. So we've got this new lunation in Pisces beginning, all of that new lunar energy at the same time as we're ending a solar time. So to get back to your question of what can we do? This last year, think about, I think we've just gone through that terrible anniversary of the first deaths from COVID, COVID being proclaimed a pandemic. This last 365 days, the last astrological year has been really big and really transformative in both negative and
Isn't
positive.
it interesting that I think it was it Thursday or Wednesday of this week,
Yeah,
where, you know, it was deemed like this is the first day that it was proclaimed a
I think
worldwide
it was
pandemic.
Thursday.
And it
Yeah,
fits astrologically right
it fits.
into.
In
Oh,
so many ways too. I mean, I could talk
crazy.
about all of the other ways that the
That's
symbolism is
crazy.
there. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's such a good time to reflect back on what this really extraordinary year has brought into our lives and the strengths that we want to carry forward into the new year and the things that we definitely want to leave behind. And I think it's extra poignant because as a culture, we are looking at this literal process of reopening to the world. And what we have looked forward to for a year is finally coming. And I know that a lot of people that I've talked to have ambivalence about it because there have also been gifts in this time of retreat and seclusion, closeness with family, and business taking different directions that has been really challenging, but also creative. I know this hasn't been the case for everyone, but this is, for some people, there have been positives.
Absolutely.
And even if there haven't been, there's still some fear and trepidation about getting back out in the world. So I think as we are in sensitive Pisces time still for the next week or so, as we're thinking back, to really be sure you honor the full spectrum of feelings. And if there's I think sometimes there's kind of a survivor's guilt and we don't even want to feel good about the things that were good that happened because we know how much we've suffered. But just to allow yourself during this time, Pisces time is all about this, feeling all the feelings. I'm so excited to get back to doing live events, but then there is that part of me that's like, wait, but wow, I can't even remember what it's like to do
You have to
that.
put clothes on from
I have
the
to
waist
yeah,
down.
no more pajama bottoms. I'm kind of wondering if it's going to affect fashion. Like we're all just going to continue to wear the pajama bottoms and fuzzy socks.
Exactly.
So bottom line, just enjoy this it's the last week of the astrological year. It's still Pisces dream time when you have access to all the feelings and all the dreams and all the potential. And also you have access to this Piscean ability to dissolve the things, the karma, the ideas, the attachments that you no longer want and that you don't
Okay.
want to bring into the new year. So
Mhm.
it's really beautiful time for ceremonies of release and cleansing and renewal and allowing in all of the feelings and experiences and just letting it wash through you. And then after the vernal equinox is our time for celebration and focus again. And I think we'll feel it too on we do feel these energies, and
Mhm.
there is an infusion and a rush of determination and energy that comes in with Aries that we can feel. The flowers start to bloom around us, and we just feel reinvigorated by the sunlight. The sun is so strong in Aries. And we feel that literally with the increase of the sunlight and all of it.
Yeah.
And
You know,
it's
we
just a
get all
big
this,
switch. We wake up.
we get all this dirty snow this time of year, I
Right.
call it. It's like,
I remember
it's
that.
got all that salt and like yucky edges. And it was when I left here a week ago to travel for a week. We had like, mile high snowbanks of dirty snow and came back. And as in driving into town, there's fields and fields of green grass. And you're like, wow, 6, 7, and whatever days, it is
It
so
dissolved.
transformative to see like how much can shift from time
Yeah.
to time. And then I was thinking about that. Sometimes I think, how can it make that big of a difference to be born at 4:30 versus 4:31, And so I guess that's something that might be taking us off on yet another conversation. But you touched
Does
on
make
that
a
at the
big difference.
beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The moment of birth it's like your fingerprint. It's like your cosmic fingerprint.
Okay.
It's what sets you in and of the world. Like you can have a chart of the day with no particular time, and you can learn a lot from that. But until you have what we call our rising sign, right, which is the exact degree of the zodiac that is on the eastern horizon at the moment we take that first breath, that sets the whole chart. It tells you which planets are going to fall into which houses, and that speaks to how we experience different areas of life. And the ascendant is all about who you are in the world and how you begin things and how people see you and how yourself meets the world. So it's this all important piece of your identity. It's, if we think about it like the metaphor of birth being, we come from undifferentiated oneness with spirit down into something very specific and particular.
Mhm.
And the moment and place of birth mark that specific and particular self. It's what makes you you. The other stuff in the chart is sort of how you relate to that big cosmic soup. But the ascendant and what the ascendant dictates in the chart is your personal identity, your fingerprint.
That's such
So-
a perfect analogy, because our fingerprint, each of us has our own
Yeah.
unique one. So speaks
Even
to that
identical twins,
beautifully.
they're not going to come out at exactly the same moment. They have a slightly different degree of their ascendant, and that's everything. And just on a technical level, it's everything as far as predictive work goes too. You have to know that. And you have to know some astrology to understand why that is. But
Mhm.
it's one of those things like setting the course where 1 degree here can translate into a big difference in degrees once you get somewhere. And it's
Mhm.
the same thing with the mathematics of predictive astrology, that without knowing that exact degree of the ascendant, we can't say much. So
Mhm.
it's important for a lot of reasons, but I think that fingerprint analogy is a good one. It
Yeah.
really does make a big difference to know that exact time, because it's you, it's your particularity. It's the moment in time that placed you on the earth as a particular being, instead of being part of the undifferentiated spirit. You took that first breath, you were you,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it marks that.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then that's the you that's traveling through space and time
Yeah.
for the rest of time, at least
Yeah.
in this incarnation. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
it's the
love it.
how you travel. That's what your ascendant
Yeah.
says. It's like, how do I travel through space and time in my particular way?
And it's interesting. I have an identical twin sister, and it's
You
always,
do?
yeah, and
Oh,
it's
that's
always been curious how it is that there are some things that are so similar to us, but there are our paths have been different.
Oh, I would love to read the two of you together. I think
Yeah.
that would be so
Okay, let's do it.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I would love to do, and anybody else who's listening who has a twin, this is one of the things that's fascinating to astrologers because it really is. It's like that ineffable thing. It's like you have the same DNA and the same astrology chart, but such different people. And
Mhm.
that's the other really good analogy is DNA because we come in with a code, right? Just like our chart,
Mhm.
but and some things will be what they are, dictated by that code, but other things get triggered by the choices that we make
Mhm.
or the things that we do or the environments that we're exposed to, and some things never get triggered. And on a psychological, on the level of the psyche, there's a similarity with the astrology chart. It's not fate. It's this interesting combination of fate and free will. It's not one or the other, just like our DNA. So yeah, twins, it's really interesting. And yeah, let's talk about that in Gemini season.
Okay.
We're coming up too soon.
All right. Well, Bronwyn, it sounds like people listening and leaning into this new moon should feel like, there's a lot of juicy newness to look forward to. And we naturally feel that when you live in a place like Wisconsin, for example, because you have these big shifts in energy.
Yeah.
Like there's snow and then there's no snow. And
Yeah.
we have to go outside looking like we live, in the North Pole to where you barely need a sweater,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you really
exciting.
feel it.
Yeah.
And here it's a little more subtle, but we're moving from dark and gray to light and bright, and the daffodils are blooming and the birds are singing, and I love spring.
Yeah.
And this new moon in Pisces, it's coming up tomorrow, Saturday, is so dreamy. It's just a beautiful moon for dreaming all of your dreams for the coming year. It's got a really gentle, positive, dreamy quality to it. So
I can
I hope
already
everyone can
feel
enjoy
that
it.
as I'm
Yeah.
doing a lot of planning and thinking about bringing something more alive, I guess I'll say,
Yeah.
because you're right,
It's a
we didn't go
great time for
completely
dreaming.
dormant. Yeah, but
There's-
there is not an urgency or an aggressiveness to it right now.
Oh,
and I
just give
love
it a
that
week and
feeling.
the Aries will come in with your urgency and aggressiveness.
Okay, I was kind of enjoying this.
Yeah, no, and that's what it is. And you will enjoy that when it comes along too.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
It is a dreamy weekend and a wonderful time to get in touch with all of those big dreams and plans. And then there's plenty of time in a week or so to begin to figure out how to make it happen. But
Good.
it's dream time for a little while longer. So
Okay.
it should be just lovely. I wish everyone a really beautiful new moon.
Thanks. Thanks, and we'll see you in April.
We'll see you in April. Yay.
right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Megan. Bye.